The sun hung low in the sky, its golden rays stretching across the endless prairie like a painter's brushstroke. Dust swirled in the wind, kicked up by hooves pounding against the earth. A lone rider raced through the wilderness, her horse galloping with every ounce of strength it could muster. Her hat had long been lost to the wind, and strands of her dark hair whipped around her face as she urged her mount forward. Behind her, the thundering sound of pursuit grew louder. Bandits, their faces hidden beneath bandanas, closed the gap between them. Their laughter echoed across the plains, a cruel melody that sent chills down her spine. She didn't know how much longer she could keep running. Her horse was tiring, sweat pouring from its flanks as it strained under the weight of fear and exhaustion. Little did they know, something extraordinary awaited them on this vast expanse of land. Something no one could have ever imagined. The woman glanced over her shoulder, her breath catching at the sight of the riders gaining ground. Panic clawed at her chest, but she refused to give in to despair just yet. In front of her, the landscape stretched endlessly, an ocean of grasses waving gently in the breeze. The horizon seemed impossibly far away, mocking her with its distance. Her fingers tightened around the reins as she leaned forward, urging her horse onward. Until suddenly, everything changed. A low rumble began to echo across the prairie, faint at first but growing louder with each passing second. It wasn't the sound of thunder or another storm approaching. It was something entirely different, something alive. From the corner of her eye, she caught movement, a dark mass moving steadily toward her path. At first, she thought it might be more trouble, perhaps another group of bandits coming to cut off her escape route. But then, as the forms came into clearer view, her heart skipped a beat. Buffalo, hundreds of them, thousands even. They moved as one, their massive bodies forming a wall that blocked out the horizon. Dust rose in great clouds around them, obscuring the sunlight and casting the area in a golden haze. The ground trembled beneath their weight, and the air vibrated with their presence. She pulled back on the reins, slowing her horse to a halt as she stared in disbelief at the spectacle before her. The bandits, too, saw the buffalo and reined their horses. Confusion etched onto their faces. For a moment, there was silence save for the heavy breathing of animals and humans alike. Then, without warning, the lead bandit shouted orders, his voice cutting through the stillness. "We'll ride through them," he barked, spurring his horse forward. "Don't let her get away." But the buffalo stood firm, their massive heads lowered as if ready to charge. The woman watched in awe as the herd formed a solid barrier, blocking any attempt at passage. Some of the bandits hesitated, clearly unnerved by the sheer size and determination of the animals. Others pressed forward recklessly, only to find themselves turned back by the unyielding wall of muscle and horn. She sat frozen on her horse, torn between gratitude and disbelief. How could these creatures, wild and untamed, have known she needed help? And why would they choose to protect her, a stranger who had done nothing to earn their loyalty? As the standoff continued, the woman allowed herself a brief moment to reflect on what had brought her to this point. She remembered the day it all began, the day her life took a turn she never could have foreseen. It started with a letter, a single piece of paper folded neatly and slipped under her door late one night. When she opened it, her hands shook, not from cold, but from the words written inside. The letter spoke of betrayal, of secrets buried deep within the town she called home. It accused someone close to her of crimes she couldn't believe possible. At first, she dismissed it as nonsense, some kind of cruel prank meant to unsettle her. But then, as events unfolded, she realized the truth was far darker than she dared to imagine. People began disappearing. Not just anyone, but those connected to the accusations in the letter. Each disappearance left behind whispers and rumors, fueling the fire of suspicion that burned through the community. And when her own name started being mentioned in hushed tones, she knew she had to act quickly. That was when she fled. Packing only the essentials, she mounted her horse and set out into the unknown, hoping to uncover the truth before it consumed her entirely. But the bandits had been waiting, lurking in the shadows, ready to strike. They claimed to be searching for stolen goods, but she suspected their motives ran deeper. Perhaps they sought revenge for exposing truths best left buried. Now, surrounded by the buffalo and pursued by men intent on capturing her, She felt both trapped and strangely safe. The animal's presence filled her with a sense of wonder she hadn't expected to feel in such dire circumstances. Their eyes, though wild, held a wisdom that defied explanation, as if they understood her plight and chose to intervene. The bandits eventually gave up their futile attempts to breach the buffalo line. With curses and threats, they turned their horses and rode off, vanishing into the distance as quickly as they had appeared. The woman sighed in relief, her body trembling from the adrenaline that coursed through her veins. Slowly, she urged her horse forward, moving cautiously among the buffalo until she reached the other side. But as she emerged from the herd, she noticed something strange. One of the larger bulls stepped forward, its gaze fixed intently on her. There was something familiar about it, something almost human in the way it regarded her. Before she could process the thought further, the bull lowered its head and nudged her leg gently, as if urging her to follow. Curiosity piqued. She dismounted and allowed the animal to lead her deeper into the prairie. The buffalo walked with purpose, its movements deliberate and steady. She followed silently, her mind racing with questions. Where was this creature taking her? What did it want? After what felt like hours, they arrived at a clearing unlike any she had seen before. The grass here was greener, the air cooler, and a small spring bubbled up from the ground, creating a pool of crystal-clear water. Surrounding the spring were stones arranged in intricate patterns, as if marking sacred ground. In the center of the clearing stood an old man, his weathered face framed by long gray hair. He wore clothing made of hides and carried himself with the quiet dignity of someone who had lived many lifetimes. The buffalo stopped beside him, bowing its head respectfully. The woman approached cautiously, unsure whether to trust this strange figure. But as she drew closer, he smiled warmly, his eyes twinkling with kindness. "Welcome," he said, his voice deep and resonant. "You've been chosen." "Chosen," she repeated, her brow furrowing. "For what?" He gestured to the spring. "This place holds answers you seek. The spirits of the land have deemed you worthy of their guidance." Her mind reeled. Spirits? Guidance? None of it made sense. Yet she couldn't deny the pull she felt toward the spring. Kneeling beside it, she dipped her hands into the cool water, letting it flow between her fingers. As she did so, images began to form in her mind, vivid, lifelike scenes that revealed truths she had long suspected but feared to confront. The person responsible for the disappearances was not who she thought. It was someone she trusted, someone she believed incapable of such deeds. The realization hit her like a punch to the gut, leaving her gasping for air. Tears streamed down her face as the full weight of betrayal settled over her. When she finally looked up, the old man was gone. So was the buffalo. Only the spring remained, its water shimmering under the fading light of the setting sun. She sat there for a long time, processing everything she had learned. The world around her seemed quieter now, as if holding its breath while she grappled with her newfound knowledge. Eventually, she rose to her feet, determination replacing the shock and sadness. She knew what she had to do next. Returning to the town would be dangerous, but she couldn't let the truth remain hidden any longer. Too many lives depended on it. As she prepared to leave the clearing, she glanced back one last time at the spring. Somewhere in the distance, a low rumble sounded. The buffalo, moving once again across the prairie. She smiled faintly, knowing that whatever lay ahead, she wouldn't face it alone. Forces greater than herself were watching over her, guiding her steps. And so, with renewed resolve, she mounted her horse and rode toward the horizon, ready to confront the darkness that threatened to consume her world. Little did she know, the journey was only beginning. The sun dipped lower, casting long shadows across the prairie as she rode toward the distant silhouette of her hometown. The air grew cooler with the approach of evening, and the first stars began to twinkle faintly in the deepening twilight. Her heart pounded not only from the physical exertion of the ride, but also from the anticipation of what awaited her upon her return. She knew that revealing the truth would shake the very foundation of the community, unraveling bonds that had been woven over generations. As she neared the outskirts of the town, the familiar scent of wood smoke greeted her, mingling with the earthy aroma of freshly tilled soil. Lanterns flickered in windows, their soft golden glow a stark contrast to the harsh reality she carried within her. She reined her horse to a halt at the edge of the forest that bordered the settlement, taking a moment to gather her thoughts before venturing further. Her mind raced with possibilities. Would they believe her? Or would they dismiss her claims as the ramblings of a woman driven mad by fear and exile? She clenched her fists tightly, reminding herself that doubt was a luxury she could not afford. If she hesitated now, more lives might be lost. With a deep breath, she urged her horse forward, entering the main street of town just as the first crickets began their nightly symphony. The streets were quiet, most residents having retreated indoors for the evening. But as she passed by the saloon, laughter spilled out into the night, accompanied by the clinking of glasses and the strumming of a guitar. For a brief moment, she allowed herself to remember simpler times when laughter came easily and trust wasn't something to be questioned. She dismounted near the sheriff's office, tying her horse to the post with practiced ease. The wooden structure loomed before her, its paint peeling and windows darkened. She knocked firmly on the door, her knuckles echoing through the stillness. Moments later, the sound of footsteps approached, followed by the creak of the lock being turned. The sheriff stood before her, his face etched with lines of fatigue and worry. His hat was tilted slightly askew, and his shirt bore the stains of a hard day's work. "Ma'am," he said, surprise evident in his voice, "we thought you'd left for good." "I did," she replied, stepping inside without waiting for an invitation. "But I've come back because there are things you need to know." He closed the door behind her, his expression shifting from curiosity to concern. "You look like you've seen a ghost. What's happened?" She took a seat, her hands trembling slightly as she recounted everything. The letter, the disappearances, the pursuit by bandits, and finally, the revelation at the spring. As she spoke, the sheriff listened intently, his brow furrowing deeper with each detail. When she finished, he remained silent for several moments, processing the weight of her words. "It's unbelievable," he murmured finally. "But if even half of what you say is true—" "It is," she interrupted firmly. "And we can't wait any longer. Tomorrow, we gather everyone in the square. It's time they hear the truth." The sheriff nodded reluctantly. "All right, but be prepared. They won't take it lightly. Some will fight tooth and nail to protect their secrets." She met his gaze squarely. "Then let them try. I'm done running." The next morning dawned clear and bright, the kind of day that promised renewal despite its challenges. The townsfolk gathered in the central square, drawn by the sheriff's announcement the previous evening. Whispers rippled through the crowd as people exchanged glances filled with suspicion and unease. Children clung to their parents' legs, sensing the tension in the air. She stood on a makeshift platform beside the sheriff, her heart pounding so loudly she feared others might hear it. The man accused of the crime sat nearby, seemingly oblivious to the storm about to break around him. His smile was charming, his demeanor calm, giving no hint of the darkness lurking beneath. When the crowd had settled, the sheriff stepped forward, raising his voice to address them. "Friends," he began, his tone steady yet firm. "Today, we confront a matter that has haunted our town for too long. Thanks to one brave soul among us, the truth may finally come to light." He gestured toward her, and all eyes turned to meet hers. She swallowed hard, then stepped forward, her voice ringing out clearly despite the knots twisting in her stomach. "I won't mince words," she declared. "Someone here has been responsible for the disappearances that have plagued our community. Someone who had betrayed our trust and used fear to silence those who dared question them." Gasps erupted from the crowd, some covering their mouths in shock, while others muttered angrily among themselves. Pointing fingers began to rise, accusations flying before anyone had heard the full story. She held up a hand, silencing the chaos with surprising authority. "The evidence points to one person," she continued, her gaze locking onto a man seated nearby. "And though it pains me to say it, that person is none other than our own mayor." A collective gasp swept to the gathering, disbelief written plainly on every face. The mayor rose slowly, his smile faltering for the first time. "This is preposterous," he exclaimed, spreading his arms wide. "How dare you accuse me of such atrocities? I have served this town faithfully for years." "Faithfully?" she countered, stepping closer until they stood face to face. "Or merely cleverly enough to hide your tracks? You preyed on those weaker than yourself, using your position to manipulate and control. But the spirits of the land saw your deeds, and they chose to reveal them through me." His smirk returned, tinged now with mockery. "Spirits, you say? Are we to believe some mystical force guided you to this conclusion? That sounds more like superstition than fact." "Believe what you will," she retorted evenly, "but the facts remain unchanged. And if you refuse to accept them, then perhaps the buffalo who protected me will make their presence known once again." At her words, a low rumble echoed across the prairie, growing louder until it reached the ears of everyone present. Heads turned toward the horizon, where a dark mass began to appear, a wall of buffalo moving steadily toward the town. Panic surged through the crowd, some fleeing in terror, while others stood frozen in place. The mayor paled visibly, his bravado crumbling under the pressure. This isn't possible," he stammered, backing away as the animals drew nearer. "It is," she confirmed, her voice unwavering. "And it serves as a reminder that justice comes not only from humans, but from the world itself. Admit your crimes or face the consequences." Faced with no other choice, the mayor dropped to his knees, tears streaming down his face as he confessed everything. The crowd watched in stunned silence, their anger and grief turning to relief as the truth finally came to light. In the days that followed, the town worked together to rebuild trust and heal old wounds. The buffalo disappeared as suddenly as they had appeared, leaving behind only memories of their miraculous intervention. And though life would never be exactly the same, the woman found solace in knowing she played a part in restoring balance to her world. As she rode off into the sunset, her journey complete, she couldn't help but smile at the thought of the forces that had aided her along the way. Perhaps, she mused, the spirits of the land weren't so mysterious after all. Perhaps they simply chose to reveal themselves to those willing to listen.